All right, folks, so a few weeks ago I said, Easter is over, now what? Right, now what? That Easter is done, what do we do now? What do we do as followers of the risen Christ? You know, his life takes on more significance as we consider that he rose from the dead. Everything that he said is verified when we consider that he rose from the dead. But Jesus' words and his actions after the resurrection are very meaningful too. The disciples went back to work. Did you notice that? They didn't just hang around and do nothing. They went back to work. And I suppose we do the same. Every Sunday we come and we worship, and then what do? We go back. We go back to our places of work and to our places outside of here, and we do what God has called us to do back there. So my question is, what are we going to do with Jesus in our daily lives, right? In our normal lives, not just sort of hanging around in the church or doing the church things. It's important that we do them, but what are we going to do with Jesus when we do our normal things? I think there are some truths in this passage that it spoke to me deeply as I read it during the week about how I could live my daily life for Jesus. And so I want to share them with you as we go through some of these things. The first thing that I saw in this passage is the disciples fellowshipping with Jesus, number one. I love that verse. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Come and sit with me. Come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. And so Jesus came, he took the bread and he gave it to them and did the same with the fish. That song we just sang is an old song that I've just recorded out of the 1914 hymnal. And I was reading these words of these songs and I thought, that's a beautiful song. Friendship with Jesus, fellowship divine. Oh, what blessed, sweet communion. Jesus is a friend of mine. Do you relate to that? Did you relate to the words as we sang them? How beautiful, how sweet to sit with Jesus and just be his friend. I love how Jesus invited them to breakfast. He said, come and sit with me. Come and have a meal with me. For Shireen and I, one of our favorite things to do is to go out and have breakfast together. Sure, we can have breakfast at home, and of course most of the time we do, but there's something special about just sharing a meal together somewhere else. Somehow we seem to talk about different things when we're out. You all know the Yami special, right? That breakfast special. It's right around the corner from our house, so we find ourselves there a lot. And you know how many people from this community we see there at Yami? We see Jiddu and Keith after park run having a nice kuier. We see Margie and George there all the time. There's something special about sitting and having a meal together, right? We love it. Jesus says to you and I, come and have a meal with me. Come and sit with me. Come and just be my friend. Let's look each other in the eye and enjoy each other's company. Do we take him up on this offer? That's my question. It's a daily offer. It's not a Saturday morning after park run offer. Right? With Jesus, it's a divine offer for us to spend every day, at least part of it, sitting especially with him in the quiet and talking with him. What a wonderful offer. We can fall into two traps when it comes to fellowship with Jesus. Either we don't do it at all. We just go about our lives and we pray as we're busy, which is a good thing. We should be praying all the time. But we never take the time to just sit with him. Or we do our quiet time as like a business. We sit down with God and say, okay, this is what I've got to achieve here today. I've got this much time, boom, 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 done. And you get up and you go. Such a wasted day when we've ignored Jesus' offer of fellowship or when we've treated it like a business transaction. Instead, it should be a time of deep conversation and closeness with him as our closest friend. It's so vital for us as Christians. Easter is a month behind us, but every day, Jesus reaches out his hand and says to you and I, come and sit with me. Come and read my word. Come and pray. Let's get close. And in fact, there's nothing more formational for us as Christians as doing this. We don't grow in our faith without this type of thing. Carla Sundberg is one of the Church of the Nazarenes general superintendents. She's one of the big six, right? I'm reading a book of hers at the moment called Teach Us to Pray. And she wrote this in this book. I thought it was quite profound. She said, we need to create deserted places where we can simply be alone with Jesus. We need to create deserted places where we can simply be alone with Jesus. In doing so, we will receive wisdom and strength that can only come from Him. I love that. Will you fellowship with the risen Christ? Will you take the time? Oh, how easy to let this one slip. Oh, how easy to rush out into your day because you're busy. I know, you're all hectic. We've got hectic schedules. Take the time to sit with Him. Drink in His words. Share what's on your heart. You'll be nourished. You'll be nourished spiritually. Your soul will find its rest and peace in fellowship with Jesus like nothing else. And so just as He reached out to Peter and the disciples and said, come and have breakfast with me, hear that every time you wake up. Hear the words of Jesus saying, come, my child, sit with me, and let's do this day together. But Jesus does more than feed us. He always challenges and convicts us. And we see this in this passage because the next thing He does is He challenges us to feed His sheep. Number 2. One of the most profound moments in the whole Bible is Jesus' conversation with Peter here. Remember, not too long before Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. In John 18, we read that Peter was warming himself by a fire outside the court while Jesus' trial was going on. And so here, Peter calls Jesus and says, come and warm yourself by the fire. I wonder, as they sat around that fire, if Peter didn't immediately think back to what had happened there just a few days before. Maybe he started to feel some guilt and shame. But Jesus looks at him and says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. He challenged him. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes. Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. If we go to the next one, the 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. 3 times he denied Jesus. 3 times Jesus gave him the chance to declare his love for him. What a beautiful picture of Jesus restoring grace in our lives. Maybe you're here today, and if you had to sit across a braai with Jesus on the other side, you'd be thinking, oh, he knows. He knows what I did in the courtyard. Maybe shame is a part of your life because you've denied Christ more than 3 times. Maybe Jesus is saying to you today, do you love me? Do you love me? And can I tell you this today? He's not here to try to kick you around. He's not here to beat you up and condemn you. He's here to restore you. Like Peter said last week, he wants to pull you out of your old life and set you free. He wants to set you free from that shame. He did it for Simon Peter because instead of taking him on about those denials, he could have done that. He could have said, I know what you've done. Now repent. But he gave him a chance. He restored him with grace and with love and compassion. And he said, okay, I know that you love me. So now go and do some good and show it. Show it. Feed my sheep. For ministers such as Peter and myself, this is an easy one to interpret, right? Our lives are feeding the sheep. So we spend all our lives preaching sermons, teaching, doing devotions, Bible studies to shepherd the flock that we've been placed over. He calls and ordains some for the specific work of shepherding. And Peter and I often pray together for God's help as we shepherd. We'll sit together, we'll pray, Lord, help us to shepherd this congregation. We want you to be fed by God as we share the word with you. But what about you? I often think to myself, what about you? Reading a passage like this, what does it mean to you who aren't coming to church to do work every day? Do you just skip over this and say, okay, that's the pastor's passage? Certainly not. He calls all of us to feed the sheep of God in one way or the other. In fact, we did a network course here a couple of months ago, and it was fascinating how we all learned what we were gifted at. And of course, no surprise for Peter and I, shepherding was one of our gifts. But for the other people, they had gifts of admin, gifts of, speaking in tongues, some of them, gifts of intercession, gifts of mercy, hospitality. Everybody came to realize this is how I can feed the sheep. Not by standing up and preaching, that's someone else's job. But I can feed the sheep by coming and helping with the tea or coming and greeting at the door. I can feed the sheep by getting involved in the outreach ministry. I can feed the sheep by going and visiting people, whatever it is. What are you good at? What has God given you a passion for? Are you going to use that to go and feed his sheep? Are you looking for ways to sow your time, your talents, your treasures to bless God's people? You know, I want to say how touched I was on Easter Sunday. I put out the appeal, I think I put it out on Good Friday when we met. I said, if anyone can come and help us set up at 5 a.m., please come and help us. And you know, so many people came. And they just carried chairs, set up tables, did tablecloths, carried things around, got things ready. It was wonderful to see people helping so that we as a church can feed the sheep. How are you going to feed the sheep, friends? In your day-to-day life, how are you going to feed people with the love of God? How are you going to reach out to people with your gifts and your talents and your time? Hear Jesus today saying to us, if you love me, feed my sheep. Find a way to use what I've given you to bless others. And oh, I hope that this church will have a reputation in this town, right? In Parkrand, Cinderella, Sunwood Park. That's a church where they help, they feed sheep. People are blessed because of that church. Maybe that's why this love your neighbor thing came along at just the moment that it did for us, so that we can feed the sheep. So friends, fellowship with Jesus, but hear him always saying, go out from your place of fellowship with me and feed my sheep. But he goes on and he says something more to Peter. He tells him to follow him. Number 3, follow me, Jesus says. Very truly I tell you, he said to Peter, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Peter was crucified, and so stretching out his hands was a prophecy of that. And then he said to him, follow me, follow me. You know what? Secular people can also feed the hungry and do good. But Jesus says to Peter rather, and to you and I today, follow me. Go further than just doing good works, but follow me in the way that I live my life, even if it's stretching out your hands in death for the good of the world. And I can hear you saying, that's hectic. That's hectic. Peter had already heard Jesus say, follow me once before. Way back at the beginning of his ministry, Jesus said to him, follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men. And Peter didn't know what was going to happen. That word just meant, okay, let me follow this man around town, you know. Now Jesus was about to ascend, but he still said, follow me. In other words, follow in my ways. You've seen the way I've lived. Follow me. Live your life the way that I've lived, Jesus said, even if it means you're going to get taken on by the world. Can you imagine what Peter thought when he heard him say this? He had just seen Jesus led to his death. He just watched Jesus bleed and die. Can you imagine him going, follow me? And Peter saying, it's different now. It's not just go and be part of this guy's fun ministry. This is serious. This is going to cost me a lot. And you know what? Many of us are the same. We hear Jesus call early in our lives, perhaps. We turn to him and follow him. It's fresh, it's fun, it's exciting. And maybe we didn't realize how hard it would be. Maybe we didn't realize that Jesus' call is sometimes difficult. It's painful. There's struggle in being a Christian. Maybe we didn't realize that it actually meant taking up a cross and dying to ourselves daily and living a life of radical sacrifice and love. And so maybe we need to hear again Jesus saying, follow me. It's going to be tough, but follow in my ways. Do what I've called you to do. Deny yourself and live your life radically sacrificed for others. That's what I did. That's what I'm calling you to do, says Jesus. I know you followed me in the past, he says, but know now that even though it's tough, follow me. Stand in my ways. Don't be afraid of the evil in the world. Follow me. It might hurt. It might be tough. It might cause pain, but follow me, because you're going to find joy and you're going to find love and peace like you've never found anywhere else. Follow me. And so Peter hears all of this, and I love what he does. So Peter, He panics a little bit, as I think all of us do when we hear this type of a message. And what Peter does is he tries to divert attention away from himself. And he says this, if we go to the next one. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. And so he turned and looked at John. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and said, Lord, who is going to betray you? It's John. And when Peter saw him, he said, Lord, what about him? He was trying to get attention off of himself. And Jesus said, well, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. And then again, he said it at the bottom. Well, John repeats it. If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? Typical of Peter and typical of us. How many times have you sat in church and thought, I wish somebody else was here to hear this message? Have you had that moment? Oh, if only John was here. He really needs to hear this one. We try to sort of divert the attention to somebody else. And I wonder if Jesus is saying to us, what does it matter to you if I want that person to return or to live until I return? You follow me. Forget about the others. That doesn't mean don't care about them. It means, don't get distracted and try to divert attention, but focus on what you can do. I think us preachers need to remember this as well. Half the time, the person God is speaking to most when we preach is us. And this passage helped me at the beginning of a change of season. I was leaving one ministry, and it hadn't ended as smoothly as I'd hoped. And one of the leaders of this ministry and I just didn't get along. I tried to let it be, but just before I left, he confronted me and asked me to tell him what was going on. I told him, then he got very angry with me. Things ended kind of badly. The month after I'd left, I was wrestling with God, saying, why did you move me here to the middle of nowhere? Why did you let him get away with stuff? And then I read this passage one morning, and I think it was literally a godsend, because I heard Jesus say to me, what does it matter what I'm doing there? What does it matter to you anymore? You do what I've called you to do, and leave me to work with that person. I'm also working with them. You follow me and let me do what I'm doing in the situation. It was freeing for me to be able to say, I don't need to worry about that. God has got it. God is working in that situation. I can just do what I'm doing and not get bogged down by the opinions of others. Maybe God is saying to you today, that person that you're always trying to please, that person that freaks you out, that person that just irritates you to no end, what does it matter to you what they're doing? You follow me. You follow me. You do what I have got for you to do and leave the rest to me. Oh, how freeing when that happens. You don't need to get bogged down by people in your life who are coming in your way. You don't need to get bogged down by those who don't understand you or don't understand your calling or don't support your plans and dreams. Just follow Jesus. Just follow Jesus and he will take care of the rest. And so we wrap up our Christ Appears series here. But that's not to say Christ is going to stop appearing. He's going to appear every day of your life. As you open your eyes in the morning, he's going to be there. And he's going to reach out his hand and say, come and fellowship with me, my child. As you sit with him day by day, he's going to say, my child, go and feed my sheep out in this world. And as you go on your way, he's going to go ahead of you and say, follow me, follow me. Forget the distractions. Follow me. Will you do it? Will you truly follow him? Will you call him your closest friend and sit with him, do his work, and follow him in everything you do? We're going to sing a good old song to close, if you guys want to come up. And we're going to say, I've decided to follow Jesus. This is one of my favorites. Sing the song while you're not just going through the motions, but sing it with joy and make a statement. Let these words actually be a statement where you say to Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to live this way because you've called me to it. Let's sing it.